Okay, here we are with the second episode of the All Things Facades podcast. And we have two of my favorite people here, Wright from Precast and Alexander Briseño from the renowned HKS architecture. So we're going to dive into all things prefabrication and how we can utilize unitized assemblies to achieve our design intent and reap benefits for the owner. So I want to give both of you a second to introduce yourself. Take it away, Mo.
My name's Wright. I've been working in the construction industry for going on 30 years now, specializing in precast for the last 23 years. Started off my world in operations where I was dragged through the mud, literally, learning all about how to build a facade. And I started with a mix of materials. So when I first got started, wall panels and units, window units and things like that weren't the dominant approach with precast. It was cornices, column covers, bits, parts and pieces, as I call it. So I had to learn, being on those projects, I learned all the different, all the other materials that we interface with on site in the field, learning about all the things not to do. And that's that's where my knowledge and experience comes from. Extends all the way back to working in the field. But I've enjoyed my role from about 2006-07 onwards, working with designers like Mr. Briseño, trying to work through the problems that I discovered while I was working in the field earlier in the process. And right about that same time is when they started doing integrated project delivery. That was right around that same time period. And that I hated IPD. The contract was terrible. But what came out of that was design assist. And we had our first design assist project in 2008. And then it just kind of slowly but surely took off from there. And now all I do is work with designers and owners. And of course, my favorite being the design teams. It's just, it scratches an itch that I've had for years. So yeah, that's me.
And Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex Briseño. I'm the commercial mixed-use studio design leader for HKS here in Atlanta. I've been with HKS for about 7.5 years. Prior to that, I worked in New York City for about 15 years for several big high-profile design firms. And in New York City, I had a lot of exposure to different scales, I guess, of prefabrication. Unitized curtain wall and window wall was just the way you did things in New York City. And when I recall when I first moved to Atlanta, that was not the norm, and I kind of couldn't grasp why that was not the case. It saves so much time, and what I thought was cost. I think one of the issues is labor rates are very different in different parts of the country, so that's one aspect of it. I was able to work on a 420 unit multifamily building in Long Island City, Queens, when I was in New York City. That was all 100% prefabricated facade, and it was a really great experience. And pre-glazed, all the louvers were integrated into the facade from day one. You have a lot less risk of leaks because there's a lot less joints on the facade when you're done, right? You're taking a 10-foot by 30-foot section, and there's one joint around that whole thing instead of a joint around every single brick, every single penetration. And so we've been trying to, in the Atlanta and Southeast region, do more of this stuff. So it's been great working with Mo and Adrian, trying to figure out ways to kind of make that happen. And HKS in general has, we have projects like this in different parts of the country. We've got a project in Nashville that's going up that is precast. We have a project in rest in Virginia that is prefabricated, pre-glazed office building systems. So, we're just looking for more opportunities for this, and there's a lot of interesting creativity, I think, that's involved in these systems that I think, 20 years ago, you might not have thought that. But one of the interesting things and kind of working with Mo and his team has been discovering all the different ways you can be creative with a very simple system. So there's a kind of a beauty, I think, in working with the kind of the simple restrictions of a system that we're trying to take advantage of.
So I think, and you hit on a few points there. The reason that I wanted to talk to both of you is because, Alex gets to see this early on from the design standpoint, interfacing with his client, the owner. Mo has a lot of experience in the plant, in the field, in project management, seeing things from the construction side. And interestingly, between the two of you, whether you lived there or worked there, you both have experience in the Northeast market, which is where I come from. And I came up in the curtain wall, window wall world where that was just the norm. Everything was unitized, speed of construction, schedule compression, just getting as many workers off site as possible during the construction process was the goal for everybody. And now that the two of you work in the Southeast, what are some of those challenges, aside from labor rates, that you see implementing this type of building practice into different markets, especially because aside from the Northeast, you probably see HKS offices in Chicago, in California, or other markets as such that regularly implement this type of construction. So what do you think, aside from labor rates, is the biggest challenge in the Southeast market?
I was thinking about it while I was asking the question. Right off the bat, I would have to say that the curtain wall industry is a mature industry. Not saying that precast isn't, but the way that we are thinking about using precast is different. So really, honestly, even though I've got all this experience in precast, I'm still very much a neophyte when it comes to unitization. It's only been, and I consider 5 or 6 years still being a neophyte because there's so much to learn. And you only have so many projects that you get to work on that are that type of project. So that's the first challenge, is that the systems that we have are not matured. They're in the process of maturing, and that we're getting better at it at every single turn, especially that gate light system we're doing that's on the other side of this the hotel room that I'm in. And that's a great looking project. It's fantastic, but we had our own aches and pains during the manufacturing process that, we had to wade through and figure out, which was a wonderful opportunity for us, because you can't gain knowledge without going through all that. It's just kind of the way it is. And then the other flip side of that is the general contractors are definitely not used to looking at our products who've been in the marketplace for 50 and 60 years and thinking, oh, well, that's a good substitute for curtain wall. It's just, nobody thinks that way at all. So it's the challenge from our perspective is educating the general contractor and trying to get them to receive that information, because most of them don't. They have their tried and true processes that they have been going through for years and years and years that they know work. So getting them pushed off of the place where they are is the other challenge. I have found that luckily people like Alex and people here in town in Nashville, ESA and Hastings, where we've had some great discussions and opportunities, and we've been able to convert 3 or 4 projects here that were destined for other materials because they saw what we were trying to do. And they saw the benefits of using a concrete-based system for thermal mass married with a unitized window. Correct me again, Adrian. Monoframe assembly. Yes, there you go.
So if even in a matured system type or market like curtain wall, where unitized curtain wall has been around since the 70s and is really a tried and true approach, you go to certain markets like Vegas, Atlanta, even Nashville, and I still see stick building on site, 20 stories plus, where you're setting your mullions and field glazing the glass. And it just seems so inefficient to me. So Alex, when you're talking to a client, from your standpoint, I can imagine you talk to other HKS offices and you get ideas here and there. And then even an owner who practices in different markets can get feedback. But wouldn't you think those general contractors as well would tap into other offices and try to reap or better understand some of the advantages, especially so that they could have a competitive edge against their competition?
So you mentioned something that I was going to highlight as another factor. So, we talked about labor costs. I think land costs tie into this as well. Education. I think the other thing is scale and program of the building. And I think when a lot of kind of emerging cities around the US, this is not unique to the Southeast, where the low-rise multifamily construction is so prevalent. And there's a lot of design firms and contractors who specialize in that. And the fastest way to build those is, by hand, stick built, right? You're not going to gain a lot of efficiencies by modularizing the construction because that labor force is so efficient and knows how to do it. The system is very forgiving for on-site, mistakes or what have you. Those same firms and contractors then use that same mentality to then build vertical. And there's different methods and procedures that should go into doing a mid-rise or a high-rise building. You have a larger scale, you can get efficiencies of that scale by modularizing things, by prefabricating. You are going to get apartments online quicker. If you're only doing 7 stories of multifamily, it doesn't really make financial sense to the landowner, to the developer, to bring 2 or 3 floors on earlier, because there's only 2 or 3 more floors above that. When you're doing a 30-story high rise, if you can start to rent and lease those buildings, enclose the facade, start working on interior finishes quicker, that's going to translate into more income coming in for them. So
I will play devil's advocate and ask there. I have seen a lot of building footprints in California, especially where you have these buildings that are like a snake. And if you have so much repetition in that case, even if it is a low rise or under 10 stories, I would think it would be beneficial. But also, does it matter by sector when you're looking at something like healthcare? Do all of a sudden those principles, go down the drain and it's just we need to enclose our building as quickly as possible?
I mean, we're doing a lot of prefabricated, modularized components to healthcare buildings. I think that's much more prevalent than facade systems. So, doing bed walls for hospital suites, bathroom pods, prefabricated. I think that is pretty common in all regions of the US. I think.
Yeah, one thing I was going to say, Alex, is that when you say healthcare, that is probably our number one market, but not from a unitization perspective. They come to us because they want a building or they want a skin material that is going to last 75 to 100 years. They may have to replace a window after 20 or 30 years because of efficiencies that are available to them, an improved system. But the precast wall is going to be there. You just have to pressure wash it and clean it. And, as long as the design is solid from the onset, then, the building's going to be there, and they can just keep adding on to the campus. And that's, I'm looking at a job right now where we had done a prior phase where it was a mix of curtain wall and precast, and we're looking at doing the next phase as a unitized system, at least for a portion of it. So healthcare, and precast have been married together at the hip as long as I've been in my career. And I can't say that for all of the other industries or for all the other sectors. Institutional, colleges have always embraced precast if they weren't already a natural stone campus or a hand-laid brick. Courthouses, things like that. They come to us for durability. They come to us for longevity and durability. That's the other side of the precast market, really.
So I've admired from a distance, Alex, some of your sketches that you started posting and sharing online. And I could imagine that's very early staging when you're just looking at massing and concepts. So what's going through your head in terms of if modular prefab makes sense? And what are some of those early conversations with the owner look like?
Good question.
So most of the work that we do, I think, is conducive to modularization and prefabrication. I mean, think about multifamily. You're working with a very standard grid, just like with hotel, hospitality work. And that has to sit on a parking garage that is very regular. So, I mean, when we are laying out a building, everything is based on a grid already. So, inherently there's I think efficiency and kind of predestination almost that some kind of prefabrication should work for this building. I think, there are some programs where that is not the case, or there may even be some programs where you're trying to kind of buck that grid a little bit. But I think for the most part, multifamily, hospitality, office buildings, parking garages, school classroom buildings, all of those things that are based on a repetitive grid where you can play with the grid and play with the modularization. We had a project, a healthcare project in Texas, where our parametric design team worked with the prefabrication modules to be able to reuse the formwork and just kind of reconstitute it in different ways, and it looked like it was completely random, right? So that's kind of going back to the idea of that there's a lot of creativity in these things that 20 years ago I never would have thought that precast or prefabrication in general would be able to do that. And there's been so many great advances in technology and just kind of innovative thinking that have allowed us to create things that or conceive of things we weren't able to do 20 years ago, right?
I'm biting my bit here. That hospital wouldn't be in Frisco, Texas, would it?
It is.
Yeah. Just
I'll see if I can get a picture of it shined up on the screen right after here. But I know one of Mo's, one thing I hear Mo say all the time is the challenge with precast. The great thing about precast is that it's custom, and the challenge is that it's custom, especially working with end users and sort of giving them a template or constraints to work within. So, Alex, earlier in the conversation, I heard you say there's a beauty to productizing it and simplicity. But on the flip side of that, the unitization world that you're accustomed to in the past is probably the very custom curtain wall, mega panel suppliers. So I think that realm of the market will continue to grow as you have your trophy projects. But on the other end of the market, do you see more contractors and suppliers coming out trying to promote or offer a more productized solution?
Can you reframe that question in a different way?
That's my ranting. For you, do you think it simplifies for you to have boundaries and constraints to work within, or as a designer, do you just love having that flexibility? How do you find that balance between the two?
So personally, I like having rails in place, I guess. I think something that you said though is interesting, because one of the things that we learned on one of the recent projects we were doing together is that really we can do anything, right? I thought that there were a lot more rails, and there are in the planning of the project, but in terms of materiality and finishes, it was almost like the sky's the limit, right? So I think there's a little bit of both in using these systems. It would be the same for if we were using a metal prefabricated skin or a precast prefabricated skin. There's going to be similar restraints, and then similar kind of sky's the limit in terms of how you can treat the finishes, how you can manipulate things. So I think it's a good balance. Like if we were doing a project where prefabrication or modularization was not anticipated in the beginning, it would be almost too free, I think. So I think of the new extension that was done for the museum in New York. Studio Gang did.
Yeah, natural history.
And
yeah.
I mean, it looks beautiful, but it's tough for me to visualize like what thought went into creating that, right? Because there was seemingly no restrictions, which is, not to say anything negative about the project. I think it's beautiful, but it's almost like they had no budget. There were no restrictions on how the building could be constructed. So, it's almost like, I don't know, like it's too easy, but it's too difficult at the same time, right? From a creativity standpoint. So I like the balance of having restrictions in some aspects, like there's some rules you have to abide by, and understanding how to subtly manipulate those rules to create something that is still, going to withstand the test of time, be beautiful, all of that. I think that's what's great about prefabrication. So
I hear the two of you riff on this a little bit. I'm trying to think about, from Alex, your standpoint, working through the design and dealing with a single source or one party to talk to, and then from Mo's standpoint, if you were chiming in about the precast, but then you had to interface with a glazing contractor or a roofer or somebody else on how to work through all of those interface details. I guess to start, when is the best time to engage that contractor? And then what is that actual design assist or, schematic design development process look like when you're dealing with one party versus having to coordinate between multiple trades?
So I'll start and then let you continue on this, Mo. I think that the projects where this has been the most successful, and I think Mo hinted on this on his introduction, is when it's been a design assist process, and that really requires bringing someone like Mo on very early in the process, right? The building that I did in Long Island City, it was done design assist. I believe, we completed concept design. At some point during schematic design is when Island was brought on as design assist for that project, and they still the owner still competitively bid the project prior to GMP, but because of the design assist process with this one firm, they knew exactly what was expected of them. I had a different project that was kind of done in a similar way. The original design assist vendor was not selected, someone else was selected. So it's important for you to get paid for that work up front if you're doing design assist, right? But I think that's when it is the most successful, is when it's done early in the process.
Yeah, no doubt. And I will take this opportunity to say, to reference my neophyte status. I'm still learning how to be a better design assist partner. And I think our entire estimating team is having to learn how to be better design assist partners. You know, for years, we have been, you know, the traditional method of design, bid, build. When you have a company that's been doing that for 50 years, it's really hard to pivot and all of a sudden look at projects differently. So I had a meeting before Thanksgiving where we discussed a strategy to transition the way that we put our pricing together. You know, because there's, you know, the way that we take off projects is different from the way that an owner is going to review it. You know, it's all about square footage and dollars per square feet and reconciling all of that. And that references the Studio Gang project a minute ago. So if you have that unlimited budget, you do have that freedom to design, and it is easier. If you're working with a set number of puzzle pieces that you have on the board, and you've got to assemble those things exactly the way you want to optimize your project to get the most beauty out of it, that's a challenge. And, you know, that's where I get the most excitement, is helping a designer realize those design goals with an eye on dollars, because all of the projects have to be built, you know, and usually you start off with a pot of money and you know where your limits are. So learning everything that I've learned in the last 4 or 5 years, and learning from you, Alex, and from Adrian, you know, I'm slowly but surely heading in the right direction, becoming a better, having a better knowledge base to be able to continue to help internally at Gate, to help other salesmen and other estimators learn how to do what we're doing.
And a big part of why I asked about, Alex, the experience from the architect's standpoint is I'm just trying to envision, you know, even your traditional punched window, hand-laid brick, or even, you know, metal panel at your slab edge project. If you're not dealing with a single contractor, you're going to have to coordinate all those materials and all of those interface details. And I could imagine, you know, even if it could be bought out for cheaper, it becomes a challenge coordinating and effectively progressing that whole shop drawing process through the construction documents.
I mean, that was one of the great things about working with Island on the project in Long Island City, because they were essentially doing shop drawings alongside of us as we were documenting the building. So there was no question when we got to the point where we were reviewing mock-ups in their manufacturing facility, when we were looking at things as they were getting installed, we knew, you know, so long before that exactly what it was going to look like, because we were working those out with Island's detailers. And I mean, that's, you know, a great example of the efficiency, right? The shop drawing process for us on that job, for the facade at least, was so minimal because we had already done it during our design phases.
Right. And I'll add to that, Alex, so I think what's going back to thinking about it from my point of view, having a design assist schedule and having that time frame built into the design process where we're not actually modeling, so that way you don't have to redraw. You can have that time period in the beginning of the design assist process that is a set duration where you have to work out what your facade is going to look like, how many windows you're going to have per panel, what's the optimal you know, window to opaque surface areas. All of those things get worked out so early that by the time you make it to the place where you do want to start modeling, you've already worked through a lot of the things that could change. So you are correct. That's one of the huge benefits of design assist, is by the time you get to 100% DDs, we're ready. We don't need contract drawings. We're already generating a model that will be able to auto-populate shop tickets, and working in Revit and working with an all-digital workflow. we can then produce forms. If we go like with Domino, for instance, if we wanted that, this is the project in New York where Adrian and I met, One South First. We were able to 3D print those molds. So we were able to once we generated the shop tickets, we were able to within 48 hours be pouring concrete, which is unheard of. So, but would not have been possible to have that workflow and to be able to create those kind of efficiencies without that design assist process.
So I'm thinking about this I come from a facade consulting background, so I can appreciate this whole concept from a enhanced quality control standpoint, manufacturing the prefabricated panels in a controlled plant. Alex is appreciating it from the design standpoint because he gets the flexibility, but also gets to achieve his design intent. Mo has the experience as a contractor and manufacturer, being able to own the entire skin. But let's make our way through the design process. And now we're at the point where the project's ready to bid. Why is a general contractor going to see a benefit to this approach? Once you get into the construction side of things, how do you get them to buy in? What are some of the objections that you're going to hear, and how can we overcome some of those typical responses that you hear? Showstopper.
Well, I'll tell you right now, when it comes to precast, the number one challenge that we have, numero uno, is tower crane time. And that's one thing that I want us to be able to solve in the next 5 years at Gate, is figure out a way to be able to put our panels on the wall without taking away crane time. Because I think it's going to get more and more difficult in these congested, downtown markets, to be able to work off hours, because that's typically when we've been able to get it done, is working that PM shift, and it's becoming more and more restrictive to be able to do that. There are still a lot of markets like Nashville here, where we can work off hours, and we're not really having that problem here. But there are some markets where we do have that restriction. New York, for instance, there's a lot of work that is installed from the floor using spider cranes. Spider cranes have been in development for some time, and they're getting larger and larger, but there is a weight limit. So figuring out a way to lighten our panels, and to be able to lift them without, a ground crane or the tower crane, and be able to lift from the floor. If we could figure that out, that would remove the number one objection when it comes to general contractors.
Well, let's say you got them bought into precast, so they want to use precast. You can use the tower crane. You're assuming you're going to do column covers and spandrels, or parts and pieces. Now we see a market like New York where everybody loves precast. It's utilized everywhere. Mm-hmm. How do you differentiate or discern that buy into unitization versus them wanting to break out the scopes and build it in your traditional parts and pieces stick building method?
They just have to see it. And that's what happened here in Nashville. Our first project was at the airport, and all these guys were flying in and out of the Nashville airport watching our panels go on the wall. And they saw how fast and easy it was. And Crane was preaching the gospel, who was the general contractor on the job. And Rabin, architect in Atlanta, was preaching the same thing. So once I think everybody thought, well, that's something that they do in New York. We don't do that here. And then all of a sudden, whoa, wait, they are doing that here. And then next thing you know, we're talking about a dozen projects. So I think it just has to happen in a market so that all the general contractors can drive by the job site and see it go up on the wall. That is, I cannot emphasize that enough. Actually being able to see the material and watch it go from trailer to wall, and do it 8 or 9 times in a work shift that covers 6,000 square feet. I mean, it's. Yeah,
I heard Alex touch on this the other day about using case studies from other projects you've done, bringing those practices from other markets into your respective markets.
Yeah, that's where one of the things we're trying to do with our project in Reston that's been very successful.
That's a good one.
What I would touch on with this is that the thing that should appeal to contractors or owners is the speed of delivery of getting the facade enclosed and conditioned so you can then more quickly fit out the interior of the spaces, more quickly get units online, and more quickly get profit coming into you. The project in Long Island City was for Worldwide Holdings. There was no cost savings to going modularized facade, but there was a speed savings that, it equated into dollars because they were able to get units rented and leased faster than using a traditional method. So you need to have developers who understand that and can build that into their pro formas and understand and realize what the benefit of that is.
How do you see facade consultants playing a role or not playing a role in this push? Now that I see the concept of facade consulting or facade consulting practices building out markets and a presence in different geographies and demographics, do you see them helping sort of progress this process?
I think they can.
I don't think there's a right answer there. I think I bring that up because I think they're typically hired by the owner, and I would assume they would typically push for something like this. So in my eyes, it would just sort of be another advocate on the project team communicating it to the owner.
Sometimes it is. We had that on the project that we're working on in Atlanta. We had an advocate that was pushing for a prefabricated material on one over near us, East Atlanta, northeast of downtown. But there was something I was thinking of a minute ago when I need to get this point out because this is critical. One of the things that I think is still a part of that scheduling component that Alex was touching on, and a challenge that we face with general contractors is that those two shared ideas. I don't believe that all of the different, some of them I'm sure are, but are a lot of general contractors and construction managers and even owners reps that are working on schedules that have not figured out quite how to leverage the power of prefabrication just yet. There's so many activities. There's so many things that happen to build, a 40-story tower, and being able to sequence those activities following a prefabricated skin install is still a learning curve for them, because it's a risk. If they are building out that schedule and they don't allow for proper time, then they'll have people on top of each other, or it'll be too compressed, and they'll have to send somebody home. Then they'll get a remobilization fee from that crew. So they're still playing cautious ball. They're still spreading the trades out a little more than they need to, giving people more time between activities than they probably need to. But it's the safe approach, and it's that part about being a neophyte in this whole prefab world. Everybody's got to figure out that this works. This is how much time you can save, and we've done it this many times on this many projects. And we're just not, as an industry, I don't think nationwide that we're there yet. I think probably New York, Miami, LA, a lot more experience.
So that's a good point, and I think something we haven't really touched on yet is the differences in acceptance between building programs, but this may have something to do with it, right? You said something about, the logistics of all the different kind of components to build a 40-story tower. I would say it's different if it's an office building versus if it's a multifamily building.
Yeah.
An office building, that contractor is doing core and shell. They're responsible for the floors, the columns, and the facade, right? And that's probably why we've had a bit more success in adoption of this sort of thing for office buildings, as opposed to multifamily buildings. You've got a completely different team coming in, to do an enormous fit out of the interior of that space, and the complications of the logistics of coordinating that probably is going into the fear or reluctance of doing prefabrication for multifamily.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Interesting. Yeah, to your point, Mo, seeing it helps you really grasp it. I remember being in Nashville at night watching your crew erecting the prefabricated panels for Gulch, and literally there was one superintendent on site from the general contractor as well as your crew, setting entire 30-foot wide spans of a facade.
Yeah.
A whole high-rise construction site empty, minus your crew and one superintendent to monitor. So
Yeah.
it's the whole concept is really hard to grasp and believe until you see it in person, which is why I think, I'm trying to think from my end and from both of your ends how we do a better job of educating and spreading awareness on this concept, because there are multiple people offering this at the moment. I just don't think enough people are aware.
Agreed.
I mean, even in terms of the possibilities of design, when I was able to visit your manufacturing plant in Alabama, I was just so blown away with the different types of finishes that you guys have experimented with there, and it just kind of got my mind going for future projects. We could make precast not look like precast, but that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't visited the plant. So maybe the goal should be trying to do tours of job sites with multiple different contractors and owners, right, to kind of show them what this really means, what it looks like, and how fast it can go up.
So I know you're not shy about asking questions, but Mo's heard me ask this question a million times. Is your typical architect reluctant to interface with suppliers and subcontractors to get feedback during the design process? Because I've found many architects designing in a vacuum and not getting that type of design or price feedback, and then having to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. So where do you think that disconnect is between communication between design teams and manufacturers?
That's a good question. I think it depends. I think there is a little bit of a reluctance if it is something new, that you're worried about the owner's reaction of you reaching out. But then there are other relationships, like we do a lot of work with Jamco here in Atlanta, the Atlanta area. So we always reach out to them when we're talking about something, if we're kind of wondering whether it's possible. But there's a long-standing history of us working with them, right? So it depends on what the product is, who the owner is, I think, and also, like, I've only been in Atlanta for 4 years. In New York, I was there for 15 years, so there was a lot of people that I could reach out to. My first project, multifamily project in New York, was with Skyline Windows, and then I did my own project on the side with Skyline Windows. So it all depends on what those relationships with the vendors and with the owners are like.
I think it depends what the culture is like within the architecture firm, but on the contrary, it also depends on how much is the contractor or manufacturer making an effort to engage with the design community. I know Mo, for instance, that's where he lives, and he loves to engage on the design side, where other contractors might prefer just to get involved during the bid process. So you're right that I think that area is a little bit gray, and it's dependent on company and more market specific or market driven.
And also the type of project. So, this meeting is bookended. What we're doing here is bookended by 2 different meetings on the same project, 2 different general contractors, 1 owner, 1 architect. Okay. Nobody can talk to anybody because the 2 different general contractors are still competing for the project. So nobody's talking to anybody. But I'm looking at the drawings, And it's just like another project that we've looked at, 3 or 4 years ago, Adrian. I'm just trying, I want to scream at somebody and be like, these are mistakes. I see problems, but you can't do that because the owner has got basically a gag order on everybody until they work through budgeting these very early docs. And as soon as they pick a general contractor, then all bets are off. So that's one condition, but there are several different types of conditions that are like that. But it's all really, like Alex said, it's all really tied back to the view and comfort level of the owner and the guy, the purse strings, and how he feels about collaboration. And again, the idea and concept of design assist and partnerships. If you've got an owner that is 100% about competitively bidding, that's going to be more difficult. I'm going to want those conversations happening. So yeah.
So I can appreciate that both of you are on very different sides of the industry, but both trying to be trendsetters and make a difference in the market. So I'll give both of you a chance. Are there any final thoughts or anything that you want to share? Alex first.
Yeah. Well, something that I was going to touch on relating to cost. So something we've been talking about in our office and trying to figure out ways to incorporate, especially during the current economy, is how to get better about understanding the relative costs of things. And I think in the past couple of projects that we've kind of been working on together, we've gotten a much greater sense of that in terms of the skin. I think the thing that is related to that is something that you just touched on, Mo, the competitiveness of the marketplace. And what I was going to add to that is, sometimes you may have 3 general contractors selected to bid the project, but because of the way that the marketplace works, some of your vendors, there may only be one vendor to choose from in that area. So what I wonder is, like, why are we not just automatically going, if we already know that there's one vendor who can do this thing, why are we not just going to that vendor immediately and kind of working things out and trying to customize our design to hit a price point that is going to be satisfactory to the owner? And that's a conversation you and I have had many times, right? Like, there's actually very, very little monetary difference in a lot of the choices we have for some of the facade designs we're thinking about. And we're talking about, a dime a square foot of difference, or 50 cents a square foot on the facade. Those are things that are easy for us to work out if we've got a vendor selected up front. There's the owner should be, all on board with that. The general contractor should be all on board with that. It would be great to be able to design to a budget with that kind of specificity early on, so that when we're in DDs, we're not $5 million over budget redesigning, and then the market changes, we hit CDs, we've done all the things right, and then we're $10 million over budget again. Right. That shouldn't happen if we're all collaborating together at an early point.
True.
And Mo, final thought, I'll leave it to you to end.
Sure.
What is the one message that you wish you could communicate to the market in terms of where you want to go personally as a company and where you want the industry to head?
Man, that's a loaded question there, Adrian. Yeah, I think everybody should. This is kind of funny. I think everybody should at least design one precast project in their architectural career. You at least have to dabble in it. And understand the material before you just rule it out as too heavy or it's too much embodied energy and, it's cement. Ugh. Ask questions, actually do the deep dive and figure out and compare the materials, initially. And if you like what you see, pick up the phone and call, because that's that double-edged sword you were referring to earlier. Precast is not the easiest material to pull off of the shelf and plug into a model. You do have to do a lot of work early on to figure out how to leverage the material. You can do a lot of really cool things with it, and it can get really expensive really quick if you're designing in a vacuum. If you're collaborating with a producer, whether it's me here or with Doug out on the West Coast or guys up in Canada, just reach out to somebody and work through the possibilities of a facade and at least take the time to find out if it can work for you. Because I guarantee you that if it's designed optimally with input from our engineering staff and our estimating staff and people like me, there's not many products that can deliver what it is that we're delivering at the price point that we're delivering it at. We can create a really, really cool looking building and not have it be $100 a square foot facade. It might look like it, but it's not. So
you could hear the passion and it is in his voice. So that's Mo Wright from Gate Precast, Alexander Briseño from HKS Architecture. Thank you both for joining. Had a great conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.